I call it align yourself with your strengths. And,
Yeah.
I always say that, look, you might be good at two or maybe even three things, but nobody's good at everything. So
Yeah.
what do you love doing and what are you good at?
hmm
If you do what you love doing and what you're good at the end of the day, you're energized. If you start
Yeah.
taking on other hats and you're
Mhm.
doing things you don't like, or maybe you might be okay, but it just doesn't
Mhm.
light you up, at the end of the
Mhm.
day, you're depleted.
Well, hi, David. Thank you again for joining me today. I'm so excited to have you here sharing more about your background in business coaching and exit strategy and what led you to, start your business at Penn Coaching. And for anyone who's interested, penncoaching.com is his website. We'll talk more at the end. But thank you again. Please tell me your story and what led you to where you are today.
Well, my story, probably mentioned this, and by the way, Heather, it's good to be with you today. Um, this is kind of my third career, if that makes sense. I have a ministry background for quite a number of
Wow,
years, which I don't know
interesting.
if I mentioned that previously, but I
No.
do. Mostly larger situations, kind of a leadership role, a visionary role. And then I also have a school administration background. I've been a head of school of a number of private schools,
Mhm.
some fairly good size, 6 to 700 kind of range. And I was an executive director of a state group with 37 schools in it, and president
Wow.
of a state group on a national board, all that kind of thing. And then I've been an adjunct prof for a number of years. So a
Mhm.
lot of education background. And then about 10 years ago, I started Penn Coaching and Consulting. And really, what I found was, I had always been in kind of a leadership administrative role, making decisions, casting visions. I always say getting the right people on the bus, getting them in the right seat. So it's just
Mhm.
kind of naturally how I'm wired. And so
Mhm.
I really just took my 35 plus years of experience of doing all these different things, went through some training, got certified as a business coach, and then began this business coaching consulting journey. And it was kind of part time at first. I actually worked for another firm initially, and then I started my own firm. And then, it's kind of grown and developed through the years.
Wow. That's quite the story and quite the diverse background and skill sets that you bring to your current role. How do you feel like your background as a minister and working in the school districts, do you feel like I'm sure there's lots of pieces from that that you feel you carry into your current work today?
Yeah, I mean, when you're in ministry or school administration, it's really about, I mean, you're in a service role. And
Mhm.
so that's sort of my vibe. I enjoy servicing people, helping people. I've always enjoyed developing leaders.
Mhm.
That's just something that kind of comes naturally to me. I love particularly younger leaders,
Mhm.
who are kind of growing in their career and they're trying to, navigate their way through things.
Mhm.
I enjoy coming alongside of them, helping them develop and grow, and really just become better leaders. You hate to say this, but if you work for different organizations or corporations, good leadership is kind of rare. It shouldn't be, but it is. And a
Yeah.
lot of times it's because the leaders are really more about themselves than they are about the people that work underneath them or alongside of them. And so for me, it was just kind of natural. I always say, look, if you're for profit or nonprofit, it really doesn't matter. I mean, leadership is leadership. Financials are financials. Hiring is hiring. Onboarding is onboarding. I mean, it's the same kind of stuff. The only difference is in a nonprofit, you're primarily providing a service, for people. You're not so much trying to make money. In a for-profit, obviously, you want to make money. But I tease my
Mhm.
nonprofit friends sometimes. I say, if you have a nonprofit and if you don't run it like it is a for-profit, you will not have a nonprofit. Uh, because you need good principles, business principles, and that kind of thing to have a good
Yeah.
organization.
Yeah. And so then what sparked your interest specifically in helping founders prepare their companies for sale or exit?
Well, it was something I just started bumping into. I did some research, and currently there is what they call a silver tsunami that's taking place.
Mhm.
What they mean by that is that boomers, I'm a boomer, so I can connect with this. they're kind of beginning to age out. You know, they're getting toward the end of their career, and what they are estimating is in the next 5 years or so that approximately 10 trillion with a T dollars is going to change hands. People are going to sell their business, they're going to pass it on to their kids, but you know, it's going to change. And that a lot of the boomers really don't have an exit plan. They're, I mean, they know they need to exit one day. They're not exactly sure how to go about it, or
Mhm.
what they should do. And so I just found I began thinking about that, and I wanted a way to somewhat differentiate myself. I mean, I can
Mhm.
help with leadership development. I can help with scaling and growing your business,
Mhm.
organizing it, structuring it properly, and all that. And I enjoy all that.
Mhm.
But this is something that I kind of resonated with me because, you know, when you think about it, when you're getting toward the end of the career, what are you concerned about? Well, you're concerned about, okay, if I sell my business, what's going to happen to all my employees? You know, but that's something in their minds because those employees have been with them for a long time. They've helped them to grow their business, and they're concerned that when they sell their business, the new guy is just going to come in and just chop everybody off and you know, put a new crew in. What's going to happen to my clients or my customers? I mean, I have a relationship with them. What's going to happen to my name or reputation? So those are
Mhm.
all things that as I started talking about it and thinking about it, researching it, it just kind of it aligned with me that if I could help them in this, I'll call it major transition in their lives,
Mhm.
it really would be a tremendous service to people. And
Mhm.
so it created an interest for me, and that's kind of where I'm, you know, focusing my company.
Well, yeah, and I imagine like those conversations could start early, like it start like a decade before it's time, or a few years, or a few months. It could be probably anywhere in between, and to
Well,
kind
it's
of
interesting
prepare.
because one of the things I tell business owners, whether you're starting a business or whether you already have a business,
Mhm.
is one of the things you want to do is you want to structure your business for when the day comes when you will sell it.
Mhm.
Um, a lot of times, what happens is we run our business and we operate it, and then we get ready to sell it, and then we've got to change a bunch of things because we've
Mhm.
structured it to run it in one way. If I'm going to sell it, it has to be structured in a different way. And
Mhm.
a much better way to do it is right from the beginning, set it up so that when the time comes and you're ready to sell it, you're already prepared. You don't have to make too many changes. And it
Yeah.
just makes it a lot easier. And frankly, you will be a lot more effective and frankly, a lot more profitable if you do it that way.
So it sounds like we should all be thinking about these things
Yeah.
from day one and anywhere in between. Yeah, that brings me to a question. I saw that you coined something called the GAIN system. Can you walk us through a little bit about that framework and how that helps founders build a more valuable business?
Yeah, I call it the GAIN framework or you know system. It's an acronym. The G stands for generate freedom. You
Mhm.
know, when you start a business, most people they're coming out of corporate or they've been working for someone else, and usually the main reason they want to start their own business, I mean, they want to make money. They have to make money to live, but it's really to kind of create your own thing and to gain some freedom. But
Mhm.
if you don't structure your company right,
Mhm.
instead of creating a company that gives you that freedom, you actually wind up just creating a job for yourself.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
actually sometimes it's a 24/7 job where you can't get away because everything is built upon you. And so
Mhm.
when I meet with owners, one of the things I try to do is try to understand their role within the company.
Mhm.
And I find that owners are doing two things pretty frequently. Number one, they're doing too many things.
Mhm.
They're wearing, I call it hats, you know, this hat and this marketing hat and sales hat, deliverables hat and financial hat. And I mean, they're wearing all these hats
Yeah.
and they just sort of overextend themselves and
Mhm.
often kind of wear themselves out. And then the
Mhm.
second thing I find is that they're not really aligned with their strengths.
Mhm.
They're doing a lot of things, and many of the things they're doing, they might be okay at it, but they're not great at it.
Mhm.
So I try to lean in and with the owner and say, okay, look, what do you really love doing and what are you really good at?
Mhm.
Sometimes they know, sometimes they really don't know.
Mhm.
But my goal is to get the owner aligned if he's going to be working in his business 80% of the time, so he's working in his strengths. I'll
Mm-hmm.
share a story with you. I had a friend of mine who owned a computer service company, half dozen employees or so. And when I chatted with him, I said, you kind of have business development or sales, and you have operations. Which one are you? He says, oh, I'm sales. Without any question, I'm sales. And I said, well,
Mm-hmm.
tell me about it. And he says, look, I'm not trying to brag. He says, but if I get before people, I close like 80% of everybody I talk to. And I was like, wow, 80% close ratio. That's pretty good, very high. And I said, what about the operations things? He says, no, not my thing. I'm terrible at it. I hate it. So I just said, well, all right, out of curiosity, let me ask you, what percentage of time, energy, and focus are you putting towards sales versus operations? To my surprise, he says, I'm 85% operations and 15% sales. And I'm like, I don't get it. You kill it in sales and you hate operations, and 85% of your time is going toward operations. And
Mm-hmm.
I just paused and I said, how's that working for you? His head literally drops. He says, it's not. Right now, I hate my life. I'm not sure how much longer I can continue doing this. I got to make some changes. Something's got to change. So I
Yeah.
suggested, what if we found you someone who could be an operational person for you, who can
Mm-hmm.
handle almost everything in operations for you, all the scheduling, the invoicing, all that kind of thing. And we got you out of operations and got you back into sales. I said,
Mm-hmm.
what would that do for your company? He thought about it for a minute. He said, if I did that, he said, I'd double my company in 18 months. So, long story made short, he found his operational guy. He got out of operations back into sales. He got into some government contracts, and his company just took off. And so
Wow.
here was an owner who was misaligned, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and it was exhausting him. So trying to get him positioned right, the A that is a symbol of dream team. Once you get zoned in on your genius, what you do exceptionally well, there are going to be some gaps.
Mm-hmm.
And I say it this way sometimes, believe it or not, there are actually people that love doing what you hate doing, and they're really good at it. You need to find those people and get them on your team.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're already in the company, but they're just not allocated properly. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
you have to go out and get them. And you have to build the team over time. But you want to find people who have strengths in areas where you're weak, and then they
Mm-hmm.
complement you. So you're assembling that dream team. The
Mm-hmm.
I is ignite growth. And what that comes from is business owners think when they get the right people on the bus and get them in the right seat, they typically go, my work's done. I got the right people. I'm good. And I would say,
Mm-hmm.
no, not really. Your work is really kind of just beginning. And they look at
Mm-hmm.
me funny, but what I mean by that is you need to lean into those key personnel, not everybody on your team, maybe, but at least the key people.
Mm-hmm.
And you really need to help develop and grow them so that they're functioning at optimum potential and capacity.
Mm-hmm.
Now, some people will kind of work on that on their own, but a lot
Mm-hmm.
of people will go to a certain level and then they kind of plateau, they get comfortable. A
Mm-hmm.
good owner is constantly trying to shape, develop, grow, improve its team. When you do that, the company just sort of ignites and really begins to grow. And then
Mm-hmm.
the N in the gain formula is you want to navigate to scale if that's what you want to do. If you want to grow, make more money, build a bigger team, a bigger business, or to sell.
Mm-hmm.
And I have gotten certified in valuations and acquisitions so that I can help business owners understand the value of their company based
Mm-hmm.
upon industry standards.
Mm-hmm.
And I have an assessment that I can make available to them. It's based upon 8 metrics.
Mm-hmm.
And those 8 metrics, whether you sell or whether you scale, are the same 8 metrics that you should be using to actually grow and expand your company and then potentially get it ready to sell. I'll just share one with you. Um,
Mm-hmm.
one is called hub and spoke.
Mm-hmm.
What's meant by hub and spoke is to the degree that your company is built upon you, the value goes down and the sellability goes down. People
Mm-hmm.
don't want to buy a company that's built upon the owner because they're
Mm-hmm.
concerned that when the owner goes away, the clients or the customers are going to go away. And so they will discount the value of the company because they have risk. They're concerned about things.
Mm-hmm.
So in short, that's the gain framework that I use to
Yeah.
help people kind of work through their businesses and kind of I'll call it take the entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, no, thank you for explaining that. That really helps clarify what really separates businesses that become valuable, sellable companies from those that, as you mentioned, might just remain founder dependent. And it's probably, would you say that's one of the biggest, most common,
That's a common
things that you
one.
see?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you another one.
Mm-hmm.
Another one of the metrics is, do you have recurring revenue?
Mm-hmm.
Think of it like Netflix. Okay, Netflix sells a subscription,
Mm-hmm.
so it money is coming in
Mm-hmm.
constantly, whether people use the service or not. If as long as they're subscribing, they're paying for it, and that
Mm-hmm.
helps cash flow. Now, it's not always easy, depending on the business you're in, to have recurring revenue. But
Mm-hmm.
take, for example, if you have someone who has maybe an alarm company.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, when people get an alarm for their home,
Mm-hmm.
they pay for you to come out and to put in the alarm. They pay for that system and for the labor of that. But that's not really where you make your money. Where you
Mm-hmm.
make your money is monitoring the system
Mm-hmm.
so that every month they're paying you. They may never even have an alarm go off, but they're paying you to monitor it, and that
Mm-hmm.
creates good cash flow. So if you have a business that you can find some way to have recurring revenue, that's
Mm-hmm.
very attractive to buyers because they automatically know they're going to have good cash flow when they buy the business, and they're not going to be concerned about shortages there.
Hmm. Yeah, no, those are both two really important things that um, probably is hard for a lot of businesses to really think about in a strategic way. So I can see how, they really need some conversations to really start to think about these
Yeah.
things. Not necessarily like these sorts of opportunities probably pop up in their day-to-day business
I'll
when they
give you an
got their head
example.
down running their business.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. I heard about a florist. You know,
Hmm.
the florist industry is kind of seasonal,
Hmm.
and it's short-lived in the sense that, your product perishes quickly.
Hmm.
And so this florist, they were concerned about, the seasons were nice, Valentine's Day, Mother's Day, those kind of things. But then
Hmm.
there's big gaps between, those days.
Hmm.
So one of the ways they came up with recurring revenue
Hmm.
was they lived in a city and they went to kind of all the high-end hotels in the area, and they created an arrangement where they would put a weekly floral arrangement in their lobby. I mean, sizable floral arrangements, maybe multiple ones if it was a big enough lobby.
Hmm.
And they had an arrangement where they would just the hotel would just pay a flat fee, and
Hmm.
they took care of everything. They took care of the what they were housed in, and making sure they were fresh and up to date and that kind of thing. But it
Hmm.
became a real consistent revenue for them.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter what time of the year because they were wanting
Right.
flowers year round,
Yeah, that's perfect.
which was pretty
Brilliant.
clever, I thought, because
Yeah.
florists, you're thinking, okay, how am I going to get recurring revenue with floral work?
Right. Especially when you think it, like you said, it probably oftentimes there's certain seasons, certain holidays that they get a lot of business. Really interesting. So yeah, it's like almost like every business, is constantly in this growth phase. They're constantly thinking, should be thinking about the exit potential day so they can prep for that, and they're going through bringing their business to the next level, and sometimes that is the next level is to sell, right? That's what maybe would
Right.
allow them to take their business to the next level and hand it over to some experts that can help them to continue to grow beyond
Sure.
their
Well, and sometimes I've actually gotten where I like using the phrase exit options
Hmm.
versus exit plans. And the
Hmm.
reason I say that is because, there are multiple ways to exit a business. For
Hmm.
example, you can move to what you might call a silent owner position.
Hmm.
You still own the company, but you're no longer working in the company. You hire
Yeah.
management, hire and train management who can kind of take over the day to day. You
Right.
still have the building, if you have a site, or you still have the organization, you still
Mhm.
own it and you're getting the proceeds from it. You're just not involved in it like you were
Yeah.
maybe earlier in your life.
Right, but
So,
it still exists pretty much in the
yeah.
same
And
same
then
form.
sometimes people want to, I'll say, pass it on to their kids. Now,
Mhm.
honestly, the kids don't always want it, but sometimes they want to pass it. Well, that's a whole different approach
Mhm.
because often the kids grew up in the company. They have a knowledge about certain aspects of the company, but they've never run the company before.
Mhm.
So as an owner, you have to take some time, and it can take, a couple years maybe, to
Mhm.
actually equip your son or your daughter to take over, because maybe she doesn't, I mean, she might know this or that, but maybe she doesn't know the financial piece, or she doesn't know the
Yeah.
sales piece, or whatever it might be.
Right.
So that's a different approach to, and
Mhm.
and then you can keep it in the family, and that kind of thing. And then another option that becomes true is, as an owner, you don't have to sell it outright. You can actually maintain ownership, but you sell it and you actually finance the sale.
Mhm.
Like, let's say you have some employees that would like to buy you out. They don't have the cash,
Mhm.
or maybe the ability to go to a bank and get the cash, but
Mhm.
and you don't need the cash necessarily, but you have a price that you would like to get, and then now you can finance it over a period of time,
Mhm.
where you actually are getting the price you want, you're getting interest on that price, and you're spreading your tax liabilities over a period of time where it
Mhm.
doesn't hit you all up front. And that can
Mhm.
be advantageous as well. So there's a lot of different options that can be available for people that want to exit their business.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. And I love to always ask business owners about their own business as well, and like what's really working for your business right now and what is frustrating that you've been dealing with.
Well, I mean, like most people, I think it's really just there's two or three basic things. One is really having a clear understanding of what you might call your avatar, or your ideal client, your
Mhm.
prospect. And
Mhm.
I've been dialing that in more and more, because I have, kind of like most people in coaching consulting, I've kind of mutated along the way. And, I've gone from kind of leadership coaching to scaling, which I still do some of that, but I'm really focusing on the exiting parts. That's a different clientele.
Mhm.
Now they don't always have to be old. Okay. Now they
Mhm.
can be, but there are a lot of people that are younger that have a business. They want to
Mhm.
start the business, and they want to develop it over the next 5 years or so and sell it, cash out, and then maybe start another business.
Mhm.
But the idea is understanding the people and what they want and where they are in life, and how you can come alongside and assist them, guide them to accomplish their objectives. And
Yeah.
understanding your avatar, I think, is important. And then finding or creating what I'll call a lead gen situation or
Mhm.
system, where you are connecting with those ideal people, getting before them, having conversations, building that know, like, and trust, and
Mhm.
then having an opportunity to service them.
Mhm.
Sometimes I talk to people that are in startup mode, and
Mhm.
I always tell them, look, if you're going to start a business, one of the things you want to think about is you want to find an area where people have a problem,
Mhm.
but not just have a problem, but they know they have a problem.
Mhm.
Now, sometimes people have a problem, but they don't know they have a problem. If they
Right.
don't know they have a problem, you've got to convince them they have a problem. Then you got to convince them that you can help them with that problem. So it's kind of like it's a double sell.
Yeah.
But if they have an area where they know they have a problem,
Mhm.
and they're acutely aware of it, then it's just a matter of connecting with them. And I think of sales, frankly, as kind of servicing people.
Mhm.
When my
Mhm.
kids were little, they had these little card games. And if you have children, maybe you can identify with this, where you turn everything face down and you're looking for matches. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're kind of turning things over. Nope, nope, nope. Oh, there's one. Nope, nope, nope. Oh, there's one. That's kind of what you're doing with sales, is you have a service or a product,
Mhm.
and you're looking for people who have a need for what you do,
Mhm.
that you can connect and get a relationship with, where there's a know, like, and trust relationship. And then
Mhm.
it comes down to, do they feel like, number one, that you have the expertise, and will your system help them? And then, frankly, just what does it cost? And
Right.
so, kind of developing all of that and perfecting it, tweaking it, improving it. I think that's one of the challenges in business, that no matter what stage of business you're in, that you just have to keep working at.
Yeah, no, thank you for simplifying that down for myself and our listeners. It's so helpful to it sounds so simple the way you say it.
Well, I think we make it harder, in
Mhm.
sales. A lot of people kind of shy away from sales, and I say, usually, you've got headspace problems with sales. Sales is not persuading someone to do something they don't want to do. That's coercion.
Yeah.
Sales is finding someone who has a need for what you
Mhm.
do, that
Mhm.
you connect with,
Mhm.
and you build a relationship with, that
Mhm.
you can service, that you can help. And
Yeah.
when you do that, it doesn't feel slimy. You don't feel like the used car guy or all the other kind of things that we worry about
Right.
sometimes, you know?
No, absolutely. So it sounds like you're kind of diversifying your own business a little bit right now at this stage and building some funnels or some lead
Yeah.
generation for a younger audience that's looking to sell and go on to the next business because it's the same sort of
Yeah.
principles across the
Yeah. I'm
board.
probably aiming more toward the older segment of it, but the principles are the same.
Mm-hmm.
And really, one of the things I do is I function like what I call a non-equity strategic partner.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have any equity in people's company, but I function like a partner would.
Mm-hmm.
And I may have shared this with you, but I say, look, when you own a business, you got to talk to someone. You
Mm-hmm.
can't just talk to anyone. And let's be honest, your spouse is tired of hearing about it because it's in your head. You're talking about it all the time. It's like, can't you talk about anything other than business? I mean, it's business, business, business.
Right.
So it's nice to have someone who can kind of get in the ditch with you, help you
Yeah.
understand where you are, and
Mm-hmm.
then clarify where you want to go, and then
Mm-hmm.
kind of build a system to get from where you are to where you want to go. And
Right.
so that's a really attractive, kind of partner, if you want to say it that way, not legally or financially, but
Mm-hmm.
just in terms of working with people.
Yeah. And every business needs it. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
I make the joke, my husband, he's a therapist, right? But at the end of the day, after serving 10 clients, holding all of their stories, he needs a therapist, right? We all
You have
need
to have a
someone like that.
therapist for the therapist,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because when we're busy taking care of others, we have to have that same support, right?
Well, and honestly, like for example, with therapy, I had a couple medical doctors.
Mm-hmm.
It was interesting. I had one doctor, the husband was the doctor, his wife was the office manager. And then
Mm-hmm.
I had another one where the wife was the doctor and her husband was the office manager. Neither
Mm-hmm.
one which worked that well because it was just too close. It was too much to be together that much.
Yeah.
But often you go to med school or you train to be a therapist or something, and they're really good at therapy. They're really good at practicing medicine, but they
Mm-hmm.
don't really get a lot of training on how to build a business.
Mm-hmm.
Building a business is different than just performing a service.
Yeah.
And so sometimes, as a business consultant or coach, you're
Mm-hmm.
really teaching them how to build a business, how to make it profitable, how to keep your
Mm-hmm.
overhead down, how to make sure you have good books. So, you're allocating things properly and all of that. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's a lot of things you get into. And so
Yeah.
that's why I like to customize what I do
Mm-hmm.
to help people for what they need. Everybody doesn't need the same thing.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. And so you mentioned that the goal of your business is really to listen to your customer, your client, to really help a variety of audiences, not just the boomer generation, but to really expand some of your offerings. But it sounds like you already do work with a variety of different clients. And um, what's in front of you to take your business to the next level? What's
Well,
going to allow you to do
I'm in a
that?
little different stage of life. This is, like I said,
Yeah.
my third career. So I'm
Yeah.
not trying to build a big team. I'm not trying to build a
Right.
big practice. For
Yeah.
me, a full clientele for me is about a dozen clients a year.
Mm-hmm.
So that allows me to be a little pickier
Yeah.
about the people I want to work with. And typically, I want a little more higher end client who's at a different stage of life who can pay me, reasonably well. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I can invest in their company, in their business, in their lives more
Hmm.
deeply.
Yeah.
And so that's really kind of where I am. And my goal is to kind of build things up where I eventually have kind of a waiting list and then
Mm-hmm.
probably up my pricing a little bit more. But I
Hmm.
just have a steady flow of people that I'm helping.
Yeah.
And then I have three goals at this point in my life. You kind of look at what drives you. For my three goals are freedom,
Mm-hmm.
financial freedom, and I'll call it geographical freedom, where I can live, where I want to live.
Hmm.
Impact. I really enjoy impacting people's lives, particularly leadership people. Um, I call it the pebble in the pond concept. Think of throwing a pebble in a pond. There's a ripple effect.
Hmm.
I know if I can help that leader become a better leader,
Mhm.
and really help that leader grow, there's a ripple effect. Everybody in that organization will benefit from my work with that leader. And then the
Mhm.
third one for me is generosity. Um, I like to give to organizations, and one of my goals, I have 7 grandchildren. They're all fairly young yet, but one of my goals is that when they get to the point, I'm not going to help with college, I'm going to let their parents do that. But when they get to the point where they're getting married and they're ready to buy their first home, I'd like
Mhm.
to be able to pay a pretty chunky down payment for them so that they don't have to
Yeah.
worry about a down payment. They will have the down payment taken care of, and they will be able to buy a home much more easily than what they would if
Mhm.
they were just left on their own.
That's so beautiful. I remember you sharing with me that earlier. That's definitely one of my personal goals as well with my children, but I have a ways to go for grandchildren. But I'm thinking about that for my
Well,
children right
it
now.
helps to start earlier.
Yeah.
You
Well, I
know,
have to start with my children, right? Before I
right?
could,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I'm just saying, even with the grandchildren, because it take. I mean,
Yeah.
and I'm thinking,
Right.
I don't know how much it'll be, but I'm thinking
Right.
maybe $50,000, $100,000 kind of down payment. So
Yeah.
that would be as a young couple starting out. I didn't have that. Uh,
Yeah.
that
Me
would be a
neither.
tremendous help just to take some
Yeah.
pressure off, particularly with housing and kind of how it's
Yeah.
going for the younger generation right now.
I totally agree. I agree with that. Yeah. It's such a huge expense, and I think it's becoming more expensive with
Yeah,
population growth every single year. So by the time your grandchildren are older, it'll be like there's no way they could probably afford
right. And that's
to buy
how, I
something.
mean, even I have my youngest child, grown child. I have, all my children are adults now.
Mhm.
And he's constantly talking about, it's so expensive to live, and he
Mhm.
has a pretty decent job, but
Yeah.
to be able to buy a home is probably a little bit beyond where he is right now.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so you add to that a number of other years, you can imagine how it would
Mhm.
be for your grandchildren.
Yeah, especially where you live. Like if it's anywhere near a big town or a small city or a big city, yeah,
Yep.
it's a whole different ball game. Well, your vision is so inspiring. The work that you do is so inspiring. Everything that you shared has been so insightful for me, myself personally, but I know all of our listeners as well. What's some advice that you would give to a growing business? Just one thing that they should keep in mind, I guess, as you've given so many good insights, but
Yeah.
just leaving with
Well, I
one
think it
thing.
goes back to some of the basics for me.
Mhm.
Uh, if you're the owner,
Mhm.
this seems so simple, but you want to focus, or I call it align yourself with your strengths.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I always say that, look, you might be good at two or maybe even three things, but nobody's good at everything. So
Yeah.
what do you love doing, and what are you good at?
Mhm.
If you do what you love doing and what you're good at the end of the day, you're energized.
Mhm.
If you start
Yeah.
taking on other hats, and you're
Mhm.
doing things you don't like, or maybe you
Mhm.
you might be okay, but it just
Mhm.
doesn't light you up. At the end of the
Mhm.
day, you're depleted, you're
Hmm.
exhausted.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then once you get aligned properly, then
Mhm.
figure out who else you need on your team. Now, it doesn't have to be people you hire.
Mhm.
For example, with me, I don't really have any employees. Everything I do is contractual with people. Like
Mhm.
the people that help
Mhm.
me with my marketing, there are some things I do, but they do the bulk of it. They do the heavy lifting, and I just
Mhm.
have a monthly contract with them.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so I don't have to hire them, and I don't
Mhm.
have to manage them.
Yeah.
I just contract with them.
Yeah.
So there's different ways to structure it, but you want to structure it where, number one, you keep your overhead low,
Mhm.
and therefore your profitability is higher.
Mhm.
And you want to, once again, you want to give away things or delegate things that
Mhm.
deplete you and exhaust you. And as
Mhm.
simple as that sounds,
Mhm.
um, that's so powerful when you do it right,
Mhm.
because then you're every day you're working at what you love doing, and working at what you're good at doing, and you're going to be successful because it's kind of who you are.
Yeah. No, I love that, and I love that the energy at the end of the day is something to really pay attention to. Um, and because we sure like sometimes anything can feel like work if it's hard,
Yeah,
right? Even things we love can sometimes feel like work. And so to really find what are the things that actually energize me,
yeah.
right?
Well,
That's
here's the thing: when you
good.
think about having to do something,
Mhm.
And the immediate, when you think about it, if you go, ugh, you know,
Right.
that's probably something you need to delegate.
Yeah.
Okay. And because if you know how to do it and you're good at doing it, you just go do it and you get it done. And, and actually your contribution is very high, you know.
Hmm.
But I see so many owners who actually, I call it chase rabbit trails or getting rabbit holes, and they're doing stuff that's not that beneficial. I may have told you the story, but I'll share it with you quickly here. I had a client, it's been a number of years ago now, who was kind of a tech client. Um,
Hmm.
and small company, and I started coaching him. I said, "Well, tell me a little bit about what you do in your business." And he said, "Well, I do this, this, and this, and I do all the financials."
Hmm.
And I said, "Like payables, receivable, payroll, all that?" He said, "Yeah, I do all that." And I said, "Really?" I said, "You like doing that stuff?" He said, "Not really." And I said, "Are you good at doing that stuff?" He said, "No, not really." And I said, "Well, how much time does it take?" He says, "Oh, about 8 to 10 hours a week." I said, "That's
Hmm.
interesting." And I'll say his name was Joe. It wasn't Joe, but I say, "Well, Joe, let me ask you this. You're the owner, probably the highest paid employee in the company, benefits package, all that." I said, "Tell me
Hmm.
what's your, what's your hourly rate? I mean, if I had to replace all that, what would it be worth?" He thought
Hmm.
about it for a minute. He says, "Oh, I'm about a 250 an hour guy." I said, "Okay."
Hmm.
I said, "Look, I've got a deal for you. I want to be your financial guy. I'll do payables, receivables, payroll. I'll do all that. It's only going to take me 10 hours a week, and I'm only going to charge you $250 an hour. What do you think?" And he kind of paused, and then he just started laughing. And he says, "I guess I'm really paying that, aren't I?" I said, "Yeah, you really are." I said, "You realize you could get a bookkeeper for $35, $45 an hour who would do all that? Probably wouldn't take him or her 10 hours a week because she actually knows what she's doing."
Hmm.
And I said, "Here's the real kicker. What could you do as the owner of your company if I could give you back 10 hours every week of your life?
Hmm.
What difference would that make in your company?"
Yeah.
So it was a paradigm shift for him because he was thinking, "I'm saving money by doing my own books." And I'm thinking, "No, you're costing yourself a lot of money because if you would put your energy toward growing your company versus doing books, you'd be so much farther ahead, you probably can't even imagine it."
Right.
And I see business owners doing that all the time.
Wow. Yeah, it's amazing how we oftentimes undervalue ourselves in any situation, but maybe especially in a business situation, just because maybe we've been doing it for so long, right?
Well, and
And
we learn how to do it okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
We learn how to do it okay. We get to the point where we can do okay at it.
Right.
But we're not realizing that we're actually pulling ourselves out of something that we do exceptionally well
Yeah.
that would make
Right.
a huge difference in our company and frankly in our health,
Mhm. Mhm.
stress. I
Yeah.
mean, you mentioned I have about 3 or 4 things that I try to do regularly. All right.
Mhm.
One of them is I try to get good sleep.
Mhm.
We don't get enough sleep today, and that's important
Yeah.
to me. I try to eat healthy, not a lot of junk stuff.
Mhm.
Really eat pretty healthy. Um, I try to exercise regularly. I literally exercise 6 days a week. I have a Monday, Wednesday, Friday routine, a Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday routine, and
Mhm.
so I'm very consistent about exercising. And then the last one is I try to keep my stress low
Mhm.
because most business owners are just stressed out. They're running
Yeah.
on fumes, and when you do that, you have no margin in your life. And so, your kid gets sick, you have a car accident, this happens, that happens, and
Mhm.
you have no space to
Mhm.
respond. And it just, sends you off the edge. You don't respond well.
Right.
You wind up with a big marital spat or whatever it might be. And a lot of it is we just don't have enough margin in our lives.
Right.
And that's really
Yeah.
important, no matter what your age.
Right. No, it's true. And it's so, um, especially when we're younger, we probably don't understand what our margins are. And as we get older,
Well, you
we
don't you don't have margins because you're just running, on all cylinders. I mean, if you have kids and your husband's working and you're working and
everybody
all
has
that,
a margin, that's
yeah.
for sure.
But a lot of it is, all right, you want to leave a little space,
Yeah.
okay, where you're not maxed out. If something comes up, I can handle it. It's not going to stress me
Mhm.
out, and
Right.
I'm fine.
Yeah. Well, I'm really sad that our time is coming to an end because this has been so incredibly useful. to myself and to our listeners, as I mentioned. So we did mention at the beginning where people can find you. Is their website the best place to?
Probably website, LinkedIn. My website's Penn Coaching, Penn coaching.com. If someone wants to reach out to me, they can just email me, dave@penncoaching.com. If you go on my website, there's a resources section where I have a lot of videos there where you can kind of understand a little bit about how I work and think. And there are 4 ebooks that you can download, and they have different emphases, but there's some helpful material there. And then I have a pretty active LinkedIn profile, so you can catch me there. I think it's David Pennington there. So.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Dave, again, for our time today. And you're up in Maine, so I hope the weather turns around for you. You mentioned it was a cold, rainy day. I hope the spring starts to come pretty soon for you up there.
It will eventually. So anyway, but it's been good to be with you, Heather.